Tony Museum, and the last person will be the person that wrote that part. Yes, because so I can use my Swiss card.
So folks, welcome to the third in our series on Columbus and Us. And I'm really excited. I've been looking forward particularly to this evening especially. I'm very grateful to Stephanie Vivas Guzman, who's come from Colombia to do her presentation. And I'd like to begin, as we've begun each of the sessions, with this land acknowledgement. St. John's wishes to acknowledge and honor the Yokut and Miwok peoples, upon whose ancestral homelands we gather this evening, as well as all indigenous siblings who have and continue to care for this place. Let us pray. Creator, we give you thanks for all that you are and all that you bring to us within your creation. In Jesus, you place the gospel in the sacred circle through which creation is related. You show us the way to live a generous and compassionate life. Give us your strength to live together with respect and commitment as we grow in your spirit. For you are God now and forever. Amen. Amen. So Stephanie, on behalf of the Beyond Bias team that organized this and St. John's, we welcome you to our space and look forward to your presentation. Thank you so much. All right. Cheers.
Putting a timer on for myself so I can be mindful of our time. Hey Young, Kalei, Michuksatosh, Sadia Atene Homalio, Sadia Notsis, Deshan Dek Young, Dr. Stephanie Beaver Guzman Holier, Kanam Osham T. Stephanie Beaver Guzman. My name is Dr. Stephanie Beaver Guzman. I'm sharing with you Miwa I. I'm sharing with you Miwa I and Natinakwe, Meheneakwe, the Central Sierra Miwok, and the Hoopa Valley languages. And what I've shared is, hello, all of my relations. It is so nice to be here. It's so nice to see all of you. I'm probably a toddler in my language level of trying to learn my own Hoopa language, and my husband, he's an enrolled member of the Tuolumne Miwok Nation. I'm trying to learn his language as well. I am an enrolled member of the Hoopa Valley tribe. So if you know where Eureka is, kind of way up north in Humboldt County, I am from the Hoopa Valley Reservation. I was born and raised there. My dad was Hoopa and Yurok. My mom is Irish and a mixed European background. So hence you have a light-skinned Native woman who, unless you didn't see me in my basket cap, my traditional 111 tattoo, and wearing some Native bling, you may not know I'm Native. But I am so honored, and yeah, you can have a seat, please. I'm so honored at this invitation. I have to say my jaw hit the floor when I got a message from a church inviting me to come share content that I normally share in Native Studies classes. Because of the historical injustices that have been done in the name of institutions of religion. But I thought, what a wonderful opportunity to build connection and community. Because although we might pray in different ways, we all pray. And I think about the historical injustices that have been done in the name of religion, or for land, or for the gold rush, or for any of these things. And it has been easy to turn a blind eye because Native people might pray in different ways. We might pray with our bodies in dancing, or we might pray in these languages that sound very guttural and different that English just doesn't capture. And so, please have a seat. And so I thought, what a wonderful opportunity to connect because we do pray in different ways, but we all pray. And our ideas of religion and spirituality, there's definitely differences, right? And so when I was asked if I was shared with the content of the last 2 lectures, what they would be, and asking me to really expand on what are the successes and challenges of California Indian peoples. That's definitely a big topic. You could study for years in academia about this. And having just earned my doctorate as a first-generation college student, I can tell you I have studied for years myself, still trying to understand. There are over 130 different tribal nations within California that have federal recognition. And there's over 30 different nations who are still seeking a formal recognition from our government. And so if you think about that, hundreds of tribal peoples who are distinct from each other, very different language families. Natinakwe, Mehinekwe, the Hoopa language, is Athabascan. It's similar to our Alaskan relatives and our Navajo or Dene relatives. It is not at all like my husband's tribe, the Central Sierra Miwok peoples, right? So distinct languages, distinct ways of prayer, distinct protocols. And so those successes and challenges today also are going to vary by each tribal nation. Geographic location, tribal politics, what that tribal membership is going to look like. And so what I share with you tonight is not to speak on behalf of all Native people in California at all, but it is to share my unique experience, because I'm going to share with you some of my very personal experiences as a biracial Native woman and a gold member of my tribe that will tie in some of the things you've already talked about, but you could have a myriad of different experiences across just the state of California, not counting the 500 plus nations that span Turtle Island, right? So I just want to give that kind of disclaimer. And then also, I will go personal, and then I'll also kind of expand further out at our systems. And so I speak with emotion, my eyes water endlessly so it looks like I'm crying, and I might get emotional. And that's okay if you feel emotional too. I just want to acknowledge that. Totally okay.
I had the wrong address.
It's okay. I had the wrong address too earlier.
I need to excuse myself. Sorry about that.
You'll notice I don't have a PowerPoint, and that was intentional. One, because I wanted to be able to build connection with us personally, because as a Native woman coming into a church, I just wanted to build connection. Also, I'm going to be going back and forth between some scholarly content later, but I will just be speaking as an authority about the things I've internalized as a Native scholar, and as a person who's sharing from my experience. And so I think that it can be distracting if you're going from storytelling to let's go to the next slide. And so I just really wanted to create this human, personal connection with us in the room. And so that's why I don't have slides. But if you want to have further reading, or I have an 11-page document for you at the end of this that's double-sided with potential sources for continued reading and learning. It's not alphabetized, I apologize, but I attempted to make it in segments of literature, like novels and poetry, scholarly articles, even journals you could go look at, some music videos, podcasts. It's not an exhaustive list, but it does have my contact info. And so if you want some legit sources about anything that I talk about, you can, you have a full content, or you can reach out to me. And I would like to start by sharing a song. Normally, this is an intertribal song. It's a Cherokee morning song. It's not a Hoopa or Yurok song or a Miwok song, but I share this because it's sung across many tribal nations, and it's usually sung at sunrise ceremonies. And it's a prayer where you ask Creator to come into your life, and you think about having that intentionality for the day. And I think about the sunrise of this relationship and this openness that you all have for being here to learn about Indigenous people, and to really think about your institution that you have your faith from, and how to think, how could you maybe not reproduce the same harm? And I think that's really powerful. And so I offer this as a gift and just reciprocation to you, and what this future relationship could look like as you open your heart and continue learning for yourself. Wendy-o, 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 oh, 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 hey-o, ya, ya, ya. You can sing along if you want. It'll repeat 3 more times. Wendy-o, 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 oh, 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 hey-o, ya, ya, ya. Wendy-o, 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 oh, 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 hey-o, hey-o, ya, ya, ya. Wendy-o, 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 oh, 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 hey-o, hey-o, ya, 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 ya. Oh, Sadia, Tangi Kamu, thank you. All right, so now I'll go into storytelling mode. I appreciate you sharing that with me. So I'm sharing my personal story because it sets the stage, and if you think about successes and challenges of Native people. Hi, have a seat. There's 2 spots up here. It's important to think about, we could start off by looking at large-scale systems and looking at statistics, and usually those are really negative statistics. And so I wanted to humanize an experience by giving my own. So as I shared earlier, I was born and raised on the Hoopa Valley Reservation. My mom is not Native, but she spent almost her entire life on the reservation. Her parents, my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, were pretty poor, and they moved to that area of Humboldt County for the logging industry. And so that's how you get this, white family on a res. And my dad's family, my Hoopa and Yurok family members, as far back as I know, they were from Hoopa and Yurok. My dad's parents, my grandparents, they were both in the boarding schools. If you don't know what the boarding schools are, right? Raise your hand if you don't know what they are. Everyone in the room does. So if you think about that, right? Forced removal, but in Hoopa there was a boarding school. So our people were not removed. Some of them were taken to other schools, but most were put into the school that was on our reservation. And so if you think about that, right, this indoctrination of religion, basically convincing people to try to give up their culture, their Indianness, those aspects that make them who they are, their language, their culture, their identity. Well, for my grandma and for my grandmother, she fully assimilated. When she came out of that situation, she refused to speak Hoopa. She gave up our regalia, and she would not attend our ceremonial dances. My grandpa, you gotta keep your wife happy, right? Happy wife, happy life. Well, they had several children, and so the entire generation of my dad, my aunties, my uncles, none of them participated in our traditional ceremonies. They all still lived on our traditional homeland. Our people are very blessed that we were never removed and placed to another location like many of our other tribal relations, right? We still live at the same river, on the same place where our ancestors have occupied. However, what happens when you are in the space but you don't speak your language? When you don't engage in the practices of your spirituality? And when you have intergenerational or historical trauma and deep wounds, and you have no way to address those wounds, they start festering. So my aunts and my uncles, all of them, struggle with severe addiction, mental health challenges. But people look at Indian people and they say, oh, fill in the blank, negative stereotype. They look at that as an outcome or a label or as who someone is, instead of thinking of those things as symptoms of historical trauma or these systemic attempts of erasure. So when I was born, my mom and my dad were both addicts, struggling with their own experiences of trauma and historical trauma. And so I was removed from a very young age and put into the foster care system. My maternal grandparents, right, my white side of the family, they lived in Hupatu because there was nowhere else to live when you're poor. And my grandpa drove, like, after the logging industry shut down, he started working for a local Head Start and driving a small little school bus and doing odd jobs. My grandma never graduated high school. My mom never graduated high school. And so there was nowhere to go. They didn't have enough money to move anywhere because Hupa is a small valley an hour away from Eureka. So if you need to go to the courthouse, the DMV, to a real hospital, you have to go to Eureka, right? So that's driving over some mountains and needing gas money and all that. And so we have a language now that's a food desert and it's just pretty isolated. So my dad was an enrolled member of the Hupa tribe, and him and my mom were stuck in their own challenges, and they never put me on my tribal role as a child. Indian Child Welfare did not intercede when I was removed from my home, but the dynamics of Humboldt County at that time, a social worker did not want to go on to the reservation. They were like, a lot of racist perceptions still exist today and negative stereotypes. And so they're like, oh, you have white relatives who live in Hupau? Bingo, win for you. You hit the lottery, little girl. So it's a clean house. It's not a drug house. Here you go. We're never going to check on you again. It didn't matter if my grandparents, they are good people, but if they're struggling in poverty too, is it a mentally safe home? Is it a home that can actually take in not just me, but my younger brother too? Are all the people who are living in that home stable people, appropriate people for small children to be around? Who knows? Because social workers aren't necessarily going to come check, and they did not. And so when I say poverty, for me, what that meant was minimal to no access to hot water, unless you microwave it. Sharing a bathtub of water with my brother until I was a lot older, because, and like baths once a week. As a preteen, definitely not getting a shower every day like my body needed it, unless I used a hose outside, regardless of the time of year. Living in a 1-bedroom cabin, 5 of us. So me, my brother, my younger brother, and an uncle who is 10 years older than me, sharing the bedroom, and my grandparents having a bed in the living room. And the whole thing could fit into this space, right? And them just doing the best they could as grandparents. Absolutely the best that they could, but still not having a whole lot. Living off of government issued commodities, so that meant milk was actually white water, not really like milk. And but some of it is great, but it was still like, if you got food stamps, you would not want to go to the local grocery store because, an apple could be like $5. You know, you're not going to get access to high quality food. You would need to use your food stamps just to get to Eureka. And so I did have access to fresh vegetables because we had a garden. My grandparents didn't believe in child labor laws. So I learned work ethic, but I have some calluses still. And so, you know, fast forward, you know, it was a dynamic where in foster care, you know, fine, I had a safe home, but was it safe? So there's a lot of things I could go into about was it safe? But the added element here that I wanted to share with you of, you know, if there's levels of emotional abuse or other types of abuse, is that the internal ideology that my grandmother and my uncle had about Native people. Because it was absolutely white supremacist. It was, no, you will not speak your Hoopa language in this home. Oh, you signed up for Hoopa language? Oh, hell no, over my dead body, excuse my language.
It's a church, you can sing.
I was told this is a dying language, you're gonna take Spanish instead. And so I would still sneak out and try to go to Hoopa language, and then I found out and I would get in trouble and then go pick my willow stick to get spanked, right? And there are certain rites of passages that young women go through in our Hoopa culture. We have, there are different ceremonies that happen every summer. You'll hear names like the white deerskin dance or the brush dance. There are healing dances or world renewal ceremonies, and the community comes together and dances for these things collectively. And I had all my cousins and all my friends at school talking about dances and their chances to dance. And they had the most beautiful regalia you could imagine. Like imagine hundreds of these kind of beads, but flowing together with sound. And I would see pictures, or I would see them at dance, at dress and dance demos on our school. And I knew I had a right to do that. But I could not do it because you had to have a family member make you a dress. And you had to have permission. And you had to have someone teach you. And all of my aunties were not in a good way. And my mom was on drugs, and my grandma had a lot of things that she hated Indian people. And she said, your tribe doesn't want you, you're too white. You don't even look Indian. And when I brought someone serious home for the first time when I had moved away, she said, we don't recognize the Indian side of Stephanie. We only love the white side, as though I could be divided.
Cool.
Right? That was like the first thing, like out of her mouth. Not hi, nice to meet you. Like, oh yeah. Like that kind of, that ideology was so strong. And so imagine if, you know, you celebrate Christmas, and as a kid, everyone knows about Christmas, but you don't get to celebrate it. To me, that's the only reference I have about not being able to dance. And so time came, and it went, and my window to dance went away. And it's something that I grieve still to this day, because I never was allowed to participate and I didn't have access, because the person who was controlling my life, you know, and there was a lot of authoritarian stuff, and I was a rule follower because that was my survival in a very traumatic situation. And so I internalized these ideas. I'm not Indian enough. I look too white. Does my tribe want me? Where are my family members? I know I'm related to half the people I live around here. And so I started questioning my worth. You add that on top of the actual abuse and trauma I was experiencing with parents who, you know, going back and forth between my mom and, you know, the crazy dynamics. I was kind of messed up, right? How could I ever become someone who could stand in front of all of you confidently, or get to a point where I could embrace my own culture and my own self? I didn't think I belonged anywhere. But I knew when I moved away, I was homesick. And I knew I didn't fit in with people where I was at. I knew I was different. And I felt the most comfortable when I was around other Native people because of my culture and ceremonies. And so I did have some access to ceremony and culture, but it was limited. And I had a great uncle who would come find me, and he would teach me things and spend time with me. And I had no idea how much I would treasure those moments and those times, because one person would come and make effort. And so these ideas in the home, you know, when you have relatives who are the closest people living to you, screaming obscene things at the TV about racial slurs, or always bringing it back to you. If you do something wrong, it's because you're a dumb Indian. It's because you fill in the negative label about the worst things you could ever heard said about Native American people. That was said to me. Having favoritism showed to my brother because he was 100% white. And I was targeted and bullied because I was mixed and I was tainted. But then again, I was not enough because I wasn't a tribal member yet. And I didn't have relatives who were helping me out at that time, right? And everyone was just trying to struggle. Like, everyone is having their own survival of just trying to get through life. Not everyone knew that this person over here, me, was going through a struggle. And on the outside, I was not living in a drug house, right? It could have been so much worse. And for many of my cousins and relatives, it was worse. And when I got kicked out of my grandma's house and would go live with my mom, I saw how much worse it would be, until I would go back and then be like, okay, I don't care what the situation is, I'll deal with I didn't have the words for racism and bigotry and all that, right? At the time, I was like, I'll deal with it, just so that I didn't have to live in a drug house anymore. And so I knew that college was my way out of the dynamics that I was in. And so eventually, you know, I didn't know that financial aid was a thing. And so I was convinced from 6th grade on, when I learned about college, that I had to get a full ride. And so I eventually did get a full ride. And I went to UC Davis. But then I got kicked out of school because I was told I was not college material. And it took me about 10 years to get my bachelor's degree, working numerous jobs and learning the education system. And learning like personal boundaries and not to send money home to my grandma, and how to just navigate an educational system that was not designed for Native kids. So even though I had like a 4.0 in high school, it took me 10 years to earn a bachelor's degree. In that process, I had started working at a community college, learned, wow, this system is jacked up. Native kids and foster kids should never have to struggle like this. And so I was like, I'm gonna be a counselor so I can help kids like me. And so I was like, how do I do that? And someone told me you have to get a master's degree. I was like, what is a master's degree? I'm like, I'm just trying to get a bachelor's. And so then in the middle of my bachelor's journey, I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna have to go for a master's. So then I got a master's degree in counseling from St. Mary's College of California. And after being a counselor for like 1 year, I was like, wow, this system is really terrible. The education system is not designed for us at all. And me being delusional and thinking, and it's a good delusional, I was like, I have to do something. And so I decided to get a doctorate degree. It's like, because I cannot accept this, right? So it took me 5 years. And a year and a half ago, I earned my doctorate from Stan State in educational leadership. And my dissertation work was actually examining how Native women get through or navigate academia and hearing their stories. And so this whole process is really how I'm here today in front of you, because the challenges and successes, I think that I'm one example of those. In that journey of my education, I used education as a tool for self-empowerment and self-healing. It started out as a way not to get off the res, because I always wanted to go back. It just turned out that school's taken me forever. And now I'm living basically at near my husband's reservation. But in this journey, in this process to educate myself, I've learned a language to describe what I've felt, what I've seen, and how to try to change it. I'm still trying to figure out how to change it. And part of it is starting to just help educate others and to put myself in positions of vulnerability. And So that, putting myself in a position of vulnerability, right? Like coming here today or telling strangers stories that help them make connections. But it also means being vulnerable in systems that were not designed for women or people who are from poor or low income backgrounds or for Native people. And operating in those systems and trying to do something positive. And so when we look at the challenges, right? I could spend 3 hours plus probably just talking about the challenges. But if we focus on some of the main threads of what I experienced, right? If I think about the education system, I can give you some examples of my research alone, but I want to talk about just kind of trying to narrow it, just a couple pieces on my story first, and then I'll go to more of the systems piece. And I should probably take a breath.
Always.
Native people are spiritual people. And when we are in spaces where we can't be who we are, it's almost like, I think, like holding your finger until it falls asleep and the blood stops circulating, and then you try to write with that. And you try to function, and then maybe you have other pieces of another finger, and then you try to function with that. Or you try to run and your leg's numb. How do you run successfully if your whole leg is numb, but it's being numb because of a system that you're in? And that's not necessarily a well thought out analogy, but that's what every system feels like to me. Because you go into a space and you have doors closed in your face and you're still there trying to get services. So the language piece, I'll show you how powerful language is. I've always wanted to learn my language. In our classrooms in elementary and high school, imagine above the doorways and here that these walls, wherever you have bare space, there'd be labels of the Hupa and Yurok language. Images, clip art, it'd be above the door, see you soon, or see you later, or hello, welcome, or all the colors by the window, or all the weather, right? So your eyes are just passively looking at these things while we're sitting in a room, and you say these words in your head, and then people are just randomly saying the words. It's called labeling and nesting language revitalization efforts. And so that was like how I would get access to language when I was little. And one of the gifts of COVID was that our Hupa language, which is now like 8-hour drive for me, was offered on Zoom. So I had no time because I was trying to finish my dissertation. And I'm a very overcommitted person because I have a lot of causes I believe in, and I'm a mom of an 11-year-old girl, and I'm remarried to a Tuolumne Miwok man and involved in his community. So I was like, I don't have time to do another thing, but man, language, okay, I gotta do this. Well, language at lunchtime, that's how it worked. And the first day, there were elders, people my age, and 5 and 6-year-olds in this Zoom session. And we were all crying because we could say just a couple of words to each other, because the spiritual connection to language is so profound. And we were like saying hello, numbers, some colors, you know, just like really little like basic elementary stuff. And that night, I dreamt in Hupa all night long. It was like if you hear a neighbor, if you ever had thin walls in an apartment and you hear people talking next door, it was like that all night long. And then the next night, it snowed in Sonora. And my husband woke me up like 3 a.m. like, hey, check it out. I opened my eyes, I looked at the white, and I said, non-dil. And that is the Hupa word for snow. I had not said the word snow in the class. In fact, I had not said the word non-dil in over 25 years. It had not been since I was living on my reservation as a student in high school that I had said the word non-dil out loud. My brain, with after just one little lunchtime Zoom session, connecting with language, a word just came out as an automatic reaction, so that I'm like looking at the snow, non-dil, and crying, you know, like, oh my God, language is so powerful, you know, but it is, even now, it feels so powerful and good, because if you think about when you're in a state of prayer, or in church, or worship, or anything that feels good to you, it fills your whole body with goodness. That's what language does for us, right? Especially if you're trying to reclaim things that have been taken. And we have traditions and processes and entire ways of being that were taken from us. And so when we heal ourselves, we are healing our ancestors. And we're carving the way for our young ones to have that also. And so to say a simple word like snow, it means that I know that my grandparents, even though my grandma chose to refuse to say that language, my dad has passed on now, I hope they could hear me say that. And then my daughter, she now hears Snondale all the time, and she has to say it, even if she doesn't want to. And so that is a way of connecting how many generations with just a few words, right? And so that is a huge success in so many ways, because guess what happens in our brains? If we've ever had something traumatic, right? Everyone in this room has had something traumatic happen to you. It happens in English, right? That's our primary language. When you learn your language, an indigenous language, you can rewire your brain and heal the trauma because you're learning your indigenous language. And you have this immense capacity for healing and regulation if you have PTSD or historical trauma issues. And so that in itself, language revitalization efforts are happening with all kinds of tribal nations across California and the country and the world. And so it's immensely powerful. If it means you just practice one word and that's all you know, then that's what you know until another one comes. I'll share about my facial tattoo because I'm sure you might be wondering. It's actually new for me. I've only had it for about a month and a half. This is called a 111. And before the gold rush happened in California, you would see, it would be rare to see a California Indian woman without one. It's a practice, traditional chin tattooing is a practice that goes, that's done even in Alaska with Alaska Natives. It's done with our Maori relatives in New Zealand and many other places across the States. It was a part of a coming of age ceremony. So when a girl would become a woman, usually getting her first moon or monthly cycle, there would be a whole ceremony that would happen. In the Hupa and Yurok area, we call them flower dances. And the whole village would dance for this young woman to know, so she would know her worth and her, there's all these things that go with it. There's actually a book in that list if you want to read about it. But in addition to her ceremony, she would get her marks. It would happen with an obsidian blade or another sharp object, and it would be packed with medicinal ash and sap, and then it would be healed. And you would know a tribal nation and even a family by their marks, the angles, the number, and there's actually anthropology notes that designate which tribes did which designs all over California. Some, maybe a few didn't practice that, but it was a very common thing. And then if you consider what happened is the arrival of minors, right, as one of the waves of genocide. If you see that, oh, she's not a girl anymore, she's a woman. There's a lot of documented accounts and our stories that minors would use this as a justification for sexual assault and violence towards women. These women, who are clearly marked as women, would be then sold into brothels. Then their men would go try to get them. The entire people in their home would be decimated, because let's not forget, the state of California was also paying people for the proof of eliminating women and men and children. And then when the men came back, it was a trap also, and they would be eliminated as well. And so it's the earliest documents of like missing and murdered indigenous women and girls. And so would you want to mark yourself as a woman? And then if you consider the indoctrination with the mission system and boarding schools, you're taught this is not, tattoos are not a good thing. There's a lot of, negative connotations for tattoos with different religious groups. And so as you were taught to give up traditional practices, this was one of the first things to go. It was not safe. You're not going to be viewed as a woman. And so why do it? And so it's been a reclaiming traditional practices for women to wear their 111s. And there's a few women in my area. There's about 30 women who wear them in Humboldt County and Delmar County. In this area, when I got mine, I was the second woman in Tuolumne County who had one. And I had to really think long and hard about it. I fasted about it, I prepared for it. I've always wanted one. The first time I saw an elder with one, I couldn't believe it. I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And I had to get to a point in my own spiritual and cultural path to think that I was enough to be able to wear one. And there's a revolution of Indian women who are reclaiming traditional practices. And so if you see a woman wearing a 111, then you know a little bit about what it is.
How did it become the name of 111? What's the?
So
Is there
I don't
history?
know that part,
Okay.
but that's just what we call them.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it's just the 111s.
And it's
But
just the 3 lines.
it's a 3
I don't
lines.
think-
Yeah,
I think that's a modern
that's
term
yeah.
for it.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
in Hoopa we call it will touch, which is our word for tattoo. A lot of the traditional names for them just mean tattoo or markings. And so yeah, like that's just like what every person I know, they call it that.
Okay.
Yeah. And so navigating systems that, you know, if we think about blood quotient, well, you don't look Indian. You know, you don't look the stereotypical anything or modern portrayals of who Indian people are or Native people are, and even what to refer to Native American people, California Indian people. It's complex. It's so complicated. And these are just the beginning seeds to introduce you to these topics. But for individuals to find their ways to their own tribe, to their own identity, to find language that makes sense for them, and for them to find their own agency and empowerment and tribal community. When I was living in Davis for going to college there, I was so homesick and I was so alone. I got involved with a relationship that wasn't super healthy, and I was married to this person. I was my daughter's dad, and there were a lot of blessings in that relationship, but also a lot of negativity because they had extreme negative views about my community. They became a law enforcement officer, and I think law enforcement officers are great, but this particular law enforcement officer had an idea about all the negative things about Native Americans and would not let me go home or take our daughter home. And it wasn't until I eventually, when I was in a counseling program and gained a lot of healing and made growth for myself, that I realized how unhealthy things were, that I was like, no, like I have a right to go home, and my daughter has a right to know her culture and ceremony, and I don't have to reproduce the things that were done to me. And so that's when I started, you know, I not only ended the relationship, but my daughter knows she hasn't got to dance in our ceremonies yet, but we go to our ceremonies. And when I was in Davis, I was so isolated. I found students at the college who were Native, and I started building a community there. But it wasn't until I was looking for a job right after getting my counseling degree, and I was like, I need to get hired so I can support myself, especially if I'm ending this relationship. I did not know where I was going. And so I ended up applying everywhere, and I got an interview at Sonora for Columbia College, and I got hired. I was like, I guess I'm moving here. I'd never visited, but I was like, hey, it's a full-time job at a college, let's do it. I didn't know I was around a bunch of Miwok people, and there were tribal people there. I was like, all right, let's just do it. And so all of a sudden, I'm volunteering at a Native-based recovery center, just so I could be around Native people, and I'm building community and going to ceremony, and my daughter and I kept getting invited. And I was there about 4 years before I met my husband. I knew all of his family, but I didn't know him. Then when he walked in, I was like, oh dear. And so the most healing has happened with community. And when we got married, my daughter and I were invited to dance with just Roundhouse people. And so I danced for the first time in my life about 3 years ago. And my daughter danced too, right? And so that capacity for, you know, just people embracing us, even though we're not Newark or Roundhouse people. We're like, I'm from the north, we're different. And just making community and building community and being able to engage in ceremony and connection. That is what people need. And so whether it's in a prison, a hospital, an education setting, or anything, is what helps people flourish. And wherever we're at, we need those things. And I think that's why our government was so intent on taking those things away. And so our successes really emanate from when we have access, or we create access, or we are just open and vulnerable, and then you're like, okay, I guess I'm moving to the middle of nowhere, right? Because then it's the universe, higher powers directing us into the spaces we need to be. So I think we could probably pause for there. I have a lot of other fun stuff to talk about with more of the systems stuff, but we've been carrying on probably for about 50 minutes now, and so I'll take a breath.